today's webinar, From Strategy to Action, Reducing Non-Revenue Water with AI-Powered Technology. Today's webinar is being presented by Flowless and Waterless Research and Analysis. Let me provide a brief about them. Flowless provides an AI-powered software with all the powerful tools you need to manage your water system, track leaks, or reduce water loss. And for Waterless Research and Analysis, it was founded by our special guest for this webinar, Allan Lambert, and Kate Staton-Davies, of course, in 2010. It was founded to develop a data-driven, practical solution for non-revenue water management. Before I introduce our two speakers, I would like to cover a few housekeeping topics. First, today's webinar is being recorded. We will be able to share a link with you after the event is complete. We welcome you to revisit the content yourself and share it with your colleagues. We also invite your comments and the questions. Please look at the Q&A chat box on your screen. If you think of a question for the speakers at any point, just type it in there and mention who is it for. And I will either pose it to our speakers at that time or hold it for the discussion portion at the end of the event. And I encourage you to stay engaged. Use polls, reactions, or support and the chat to participate. And if you need tech help, message our support team in the chat. And the last thing, if the English is not familiar to you, you can enable Zoom translation caption, turn it on, it's on your screen. You can go to more, then captions, then choose translation and select your preferred language. See this image in front of you for the guidance. So I'm excited today to introduce you to our presenters. Our first presenter for the day is Kate Staton-Davies. She's the co-founder and the director of Waterless Research and Analysis. She's joining us today, bringing over 27 years of experience in software engineering and her deep knowledge in non-revenue water management. She helps water utilities and professionals better understand their water losses and help them promote better understanding of non-revenue water fundamentals through training. And the second speaker for this webinar is Bozeyeh. Becker is the co-founder and CEO of Flowless. Becker has been leading the development and expansion of Flowless solution for smarter water loss. And during this webinar, he'll showcase how Flowless uses AI-powered tools to help you detect stop losses before they escalate. At this point, I'm going to hand the floor over to Kate, who's going to start today's presentation. Kate, it's all yours.
Thank you, Aya, and I'd like to add my welcome to everyone who's taken time out of their day from lots of different countries all over the world to listen to this presentation and also to hopefully come up with some really interesting questions for myself and Becca and Allan a little later on. The agenda for today then, just a general introduction, and then the section that I'm going to concentrate on is understanding non-revenue water fundamentals. What we're really looking here at is where we've come from over the last 30 years, particularly with our understanding of reducing real losses, and why it's important to look at those fundamentals when thinking about how we now move forward into the age of data-driven and AI-based solutions for reducing non-revenue water. Becca is then going to take over and talk about some steps for building a non-revenue water reduction strategy and how you can reduce non-revenue water by leveraging technological solutions. In particular, he's going to demonstrate here the Flowless WaterCloud solution. We've also got some case studies for you. We may or may not have time to really go into these in much detail. However, these case studies are going to be available in the PowerPoints for you to look at later on if we run out of time, because what we're hoping for is a really engaged Q&A session. Okay, so I think that everyone's joined the webinar today understands how important non-revenue water reduction is on a global scale. It's not only critical for utilities and for maintaining sustainable water supplies for current and future communities. We must also recognise the carbon footprint of water treatment and distribution, and therefore how reducing non-revenue water can also reduce carbon emissions. This webinar is the first in what we hope myself and Flowless will run on non-revenue water reduction. It's obviously a huge subject, so we've had to focus in on just a couple of important points. So we're really just touching the surface in the time that we have together today. What we're going to look at today is understanding the core components of non-revenue water and looking in particular at some developments in real losses reduction over the last 30 years. Explore strategies of how to reduce non-revenue water, and then to look at the Flowless WaterCloud solution for implementing sustainable and actionable non-revenue water reduction strategies. So before we get into some more detail, I actually think I've probably nicked this graphic from one of Stuart Hamilton's presentations. I think I seem to remember. I don't know whether it is one of yours, Stuart, but I'll attribute it to you. It shows over 20 countries which are currently subject to extremely high water stress. This is where the current demand is outstripping sustainable supplies. And it's caused by numerous and significant factors, including growing populations, climate change, increasing demand from various sources, an aging infrastructure, and a lack of access to capital investment. And of course, none of these factors that you see on the screen here are quick or easy to resolve in order to reduce that water stress. And over the last few years, there's been a growing recognition that reducing non-revenue water can also reduce carbon emissions, and by how linking the two together, significant capital investments can be unlocked at national and international level. There's a link on this slide to the IWA's Leakage Emissions Initiative. This has been going now for, I think, about a year. It's still ongoing. You can still get involved in it if you're a member of the IWA. And the link on the screen has some fantastic resources, including the details and the purpose of the initiative, how to get involved, how to calculate a carbon water balance, and a number of case studies. So before we get going on this and start looking at setting strategy and exploring solutions to reduce non-revenue water, let's get back to the basics and review some of the fundamentals. And we're going to start really by focusing on real losses, although we do have a bit of information coming up on apparent losses, and there's some great reference material in the reference section for you on apparent losses as well. So it's time for poll number one. Thank you, Aya. Aya's just started a poll, which I hope you can see. And if you'd like to click, this is just really so that we get a feel for how familiar people are in the room with the basics and the components of non-revenue water. Okay, we'll leave the poll going for about another 30 seconds. Okay, so how familiar are we with the components of non-revenue water? We've got a few people who know nothing very little, and then about a 50-50 split from people who understand the basics or who consider themselves to be expert in non-revenue water. So depending on how much you know, the next section may be things that you're already familiar with, but hopefully we've got some interesting stuff for you there as well. Could you stop sharing the poll now, Aya? Thank you. When I was creating these slides, I wanted to impress on all of you how important it is to look back at how our understanding of non-revenue water and real losses has developed over the last 30 years, and to see what a firm foundation they provide as we look to the future of the industry. I found some interesting quotes, first by the former CEO of Apple, Steve Jobs, and the second, a bit more philosophically, by Confucius. Both of these quotes acknowledge that the path to the future is best planned and understood by looking at past achievements and innovations. And so our path to the next generation of non-revenue water reduction solutions should be based on the firm and stable research and innovations of those pioneers of the water loss industry of the last 3 decades, to whom we all owe a debt of gratitude. I mentioned that I was going to concentrate on mostly on real losses here, and therefore I hope you can appreciate that the aim of this slide is to reinforce the point I've just made about acknowledging and taking forward lessons from the past. These are some of the innovations that have been researched, developed, tested, and proven on an international scale, beginning 1994 with component analysis and the fixed and variable area discharges concept from John May, through night flow component analysis, night day factors, average zone points. In 1999, the IWA water balance, their recommended KPIs for non-revenue water and real losses, and the development of the UARL and the infrastructure leakage index. And if you look at that, that's just in the space of 6 years. Couldn't fit much more in terms of all the other innovations since. So I've just picked out a few. In 2000, 2001, the use of confidence limits in water balances, the pressure burst relationship in 2012, the EU reference document Good Practices on Leakage Management in 2015, the variable N1 concept, N1 pressure concept in 2017, and in 2020, UARL with SCF. So throughout this time span of 30 years, there have been many people across the world involved in these concepts and their application internationally. For example, Bambos, who we have on the call today, Julian Thornton in Brazil, and Marco Fantozzi, to name a few. However, I think it's appropriate that we acknowledge Allan Lambert's incredible contribution to this industry. And so Aya, Bakker, and myself are really delighted that Allan is with us today to answer any questions you may have on all the illustrious points in his career in the Q&A session later on. So let's dive into the water balance so we can see where non-revenue water fits into it. This is the enhanced IWA water balance, and the dotted area in red is what we consider to be non-revenue water, comprising of three main components. Unbilled authorised consumption. These are items such as consumers who are not registered in a billing database, and use by water utility properties for operations and maintenance. We've got apparent or commercial losses, which covers illegal connections, meter inaccuracies, and data transmission inaccuracies. And these two components, unbilled authorised consumption and apparent losses, can be a significant part of a water balance in low and middle income countries with poorer quality data. And also apparent losses can be higher in countries with customer roof tanks or customer ground level tanks due to meter under registration. The link at the bottom of this screen is to the apparent losses guidelines and appendices, which were put together by, I think, about 9 or 10 international practitioners 10 years ago. And they're really invaluable guidance on understanding the components of apparent losses and how to estimate them. And then we get onto the real losses or physical losses, which is the leakage on transmission and distribution mains, on service connections up to the point of metering, and leakage and overflows on utility storage tanks. Reducing each of these components of non-revenue water requires a different approach and a set of different targeted interventions. If we look at real losses, this diagram has been around for about 25 years now. It's the 4 pillars or the squeezing the box approach. And it talks about the 4 main methods of managing real losses. Reduction of excess pressure being usually the most effective, followed by speed and quality of repairs, and active leakage control, and then pipeline and assets management. And the aim of all of these activities is to reduce the current annual real losses, this box in blue, pale blue in the middle. We're trying to reduce it down, ideally, if economical, down to the level of unavoidable annual real losses. And that is the estimate of lowest achievable real losses for whole systems of around 5,000 or more connections operating at mid-range pressures between 45 to 60 meters. And the ratio of the current annual losses to the unavoidable annual losses is known as the infrastructure leakage index, which is an important KPI for real losses. As you have already seen in that timeline graphic, the relationship between pressure and leak flow rate was established back in 1994 by John May, and the pressure burst relationship developed and applied from 2012. So the benefits of managing excess pressure have been known and internationally accepted for more than a decade, and for even longer if we're talking about John May's work. So the main benefits of managing excess pressure to reduce and manage transients, to reduce the leak flow rate of your leaks, to reduce burst frequencies. And this can often be a significant benefit of managing excess pressure. And the byproduct of that is that by reducing the burst frequencies, you're also going to extend infrastructure life. And it may also result in a reduction of consumption. When we look at real losses KPIs, they can be used for a variety of purposes. Here are some of the main ones that you can see, and this table is based on the 2015 EU reference document, Good Practice on Leakage Management. So this table summarises the conclusions of that report and identifies which KPIs are fit for purpose and which are not. And you will notice really there that regardless of the objective of the KPI, we are definitely not recommending the use of percentage of system input volume or percentage of water supplied. The footnote at the bottom of the table recognises that at around 20 connections per kilometre, the leakage components mains on services are about equal in well-managed systems. At lower connection densities than 20 per kilometre, most leakage is likely to be on the mains, and above that figure of 20 per kilometre, which is usually the majority of systems, then most leakage is likely to be on the service connections. Okay. The closing part of my section before I hand over to Bakker is really looking at system correction factors, because these have now been implemented in around 13 countries around the world. And the purpose of the system correction factor is to address the restrictions of the 1999 UARL equation. So the 1999 equation calculates the lowest estimate of annual real losses for a well-maintained whole system and more than 4,000 service connections, with average pressures ranging from 45 to 60 meters. And outside these boundary conditions, if you try to do a UARL calculation, what you're going to find is for smaller, lower pressure systems, the UARL 1999 equation will overestimate volumes, and it will underestimate them for higher, larger pressure systems. So the system correction factor is a calculation that you do using software which overcomes these boundary conditions. It can be used for a whole system, for a zone or a DMA, for any number of service connections, and at wide ranges of average pressures. When you calculate the value of a system correction factor, you get a number, and that number is usually less than 1 for smaller, lower pressure systems and more than 1 for larger, higher pressure systems. And you multiply that number by the volume from the 1999 UARL equation to get your corrected volume. The system correction factor is really useful. Its main purpose is to identify maximum recoverable leakage for a DMA or zone. It will help you really quickly identify where there may be more bursts to be detected. So where you could send out active leakage control teams. And if you were able to reduce any excess pressure, where that will be most beneficial. The SCF calculation leverages 3 influences, which were either not known or not quantifiable in the original 1999 equation. And the first of those is the fixed and variable area discharges concept from John May's work in 1994. This is the relationship between how the leak flow area responds to changes in pressure and how that differs in different pipe materials, whether they're rigid or flexible. And the N1 power law simplifies this pressure leak flow relationship. The original UARL equation from 1999 uses an N1 of 1 for simplicity. So a 10% reduction in pressure results in a 10% reduction in leak flow rate. But SCF calculations use different values of N1 for rigid pipes compared to flexible pipes and to calculate background leakage. It's logical, if you think about it, that in smaller, lower pressure systems, there will be fewer than the average number of UARL bursts per year. And so SCF software doesn't use average burst frequencies, UARL burst frequencies, but median burst frequencies. And then we have the pressure burst relationship, which in the original 99 equation used burst frequencies at 50 meters pressure, but now we can model the pressure burst relationship from 2012 into the SCF calculation. So to show you how this works, I've got a couple of examples. First of all, a small DMA at low pressure. If you look at the box on the left-hand side, then these are the parameters that go into an SCF calculation. The number of service connections, this is the number of technical service connections, not the number of billing connections. The average length of private service pipe from the curb stop to the meter, the mains length, and a correctly measured average zone pressure. And then we have some estimates of the rigid materials used on our mains and different parts of the service connection. What we get here is an SCF result in that first blue box of 0.74, which we multiply by the 1999 UARL volume. So when we've been target setting in this zone, we may have set a target close to the UARL volume, 123 cubic meters per day. But what SCF is telling us is that really there are more opportunities to look for bursts in that zone or DMA, and we could actually, if it's actually economic to do so, we could get down closer to 91 cubic meters per day. In that zone as well, we can also look at what will happen if we try to reduce pressure further. So we're looking at 91 cubic meters, the red box on the right-hand side, as our target at 35 meters pressure. If we drop the pressure to 30 meters, we could set a target of lower than just under 73 cubes. At such a low pressure, it may not be possible for us to drop by 5 meters, but even if we reduced by 1 meter down to 34 meters, the UARL target volume could be reduced further by 3.6 cubic meters per day, or just over 1,300 cubic meters per year. If we now go to a zone which is double the size, double the mains length, double the pressure. Let's see what that does with an SCF calculation. We end up with an SCF of 1.17. So if our 1999 UARL calculation gave us a target of 493.5 cubic meters per day, the SCF is telling us we're likely to be able to meet that volume target at this pressure. And what we should be doing is setting our target higher at 578 cubic meters per day. If we look at the pressure calculation, SCF this is the right-hand box, is suggesting a target of 578 cubic meters per day. If we could drop the pressure to 65, we could set our target lower at just under 504. But again, if we can only drop the pressure by 1 meter, then the UARL volume target would be reduced further by 15 cubic meters per day, or over 5,475 cubic meters per year. So when the utilities are considering using SCF, we would recommend they still use the 1999 equation to calculate a whole system UARL, unless their whole system is less than 5,000 connections or operating at lower than 45 meter pressure or higher than 60 meters pressure. What a lot of our customers have actually done is used SCF to calculate values of SCF across all the zones and DMAs within their system. And then what that will do is it will allow the utility to see where volume targets can be reduced and where active leakage control can be targeted. And in those larger, higher pressure parts of the network where UARL volume targets may not be achievable. And so it allows utilities to target zones or systems where further pressure management could be possible, and that will reduce bursts, leak flow rates, and UARL volumes, and the software will quantify those. As I mentioned, we've had more than 3,000 calculations now in over 13 countries. These are just a section of some of the references that we've had. First from Will Jernigan of Kavanagh in the USA, suggesting how useful this was going to be for the many small systems in North America to use in conjunction with the free water audit software from the AWWA. Water Services Corporation in Malta, who were our first customer, and they've acknowledged that fine-tuning the UARL now in Malta is saving them millions of euros in the process. And in Sydney Water, where they're using the system-level system correction factors to help target and plan future leakage control works, such as sectorization, pressure reduction, and active leakage control. So that's a little bit about the past, where we've come from, and where's the journey going to take us now. I think it's really important that we stand on these strong foundations built by the pioneers and giants of the water loss reduction industry over the last 30 years. Wherever you are on that non-revenue water reduction journey, you may be right at the beginning. You may only have static data, or you may have near or real-time data. You could be much further advanced in your level of maturity of your reduction journey. But there are proven conceptual, data-driven and AI solutions which are going to help you move forward and reach your goals. And so the main message I have to close is, whatever solution you choose, make sure you understand some of these fundamentals first. In particular, the really fundamental change that reducing excess pressure can make within your water distribution network. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to hand over to Bakker.
Thank you so much, Kate. I'm sure that you're all already enjoying your time here, and I'm sure that you're all benefiting from all of those insights introduced by Kate, especially on the SCF and how it can improve the calculations for the standard UARL. So in my part, I would dig deeper into how we can actually apply those concepts in our water networks, utilizing technology to make it easier for utilities everywhere, regardless of their technical capacity or expertise for how we can help them in implementing those concepts in their water systems. So, firstly, I would love to cover how a utility can build a comprehensive strategy for non-revenue water management. Starting small, then gaining some traction as they save more water with time, and then from there, how they can scale it up to their system and or to their newly installed or constructed assets. So first of all, let's go with the second poll for today. Yeah, if you can start that poll. And this poll is really for us to customize the content based on the audience. So we're really here asking you to let us know how you're dealing with non-revenue water right now, where you are in the journey. So please take a few moments to answer this question. We'll give you like 20 more seconds before we end the poll. I'm already saying that the majority has started and gained some traction, and they're looking for ways maybe to expand from there. Keep voting, please. Okay, great. Can you please end the poll and show the results? Okay, so 58% are already started, and they are on their way to reducing non-revenue water. That's very good news. I see that some have established journey to reduce non-revenue water, and others are at the beginning, which is very good. So it sounds like everyone is on their way to reduce non-revenue water, which is a good news. Now, it's really important for us before we dig deeper into how we can build a strategy for effective non-revenue water management to address the challenges that utilities face everywhere globally. And those challenges, if we look at them, we would see that cost and efficiency falling behind targets and disrupted water service delivery. Now, those are the surface level problems. If we really dig deeper under the surface, we would see the root causes of those problems. So here we're talking about emerging leaks, limited capacity, manual data handling, and of course, budget limitation, which is kind of a problem for everyone. Now, for us to start tackling non-revenue water effectively, we need to tackle these root causes. Think of them as barriers in your way to building efficient operations and to providing better water supply for your consumers, for the communities that you serve. So we'll see how we can probably tackle them one by one, addressing limited capacity in terms of technical capacity or limited resources or limited time. We'll see how we can address those with the use of tools that help us automate our operations and calculations. And then, of course, how we can be more effective and efficient with our time and money, and addressing some really intimidating issues like aging infrastructure and how we can prioritize our rehabilitation program, for example, instead of replacing assets here and there. Now, the way we like to think about it, the way we like to think about non-revenue water management is through a comprehensive approach that we call losses lifecycle management. And it's really a life cycle because it starts from the first step towards the end, and then it goes around again. And you would see this in a moment. So first of all, the first step towards effective non-revenue water management is being aware of those problems, like, for example, leaks or other issues. And speaking of leaks, we see that many utilities jump right to trying to fix leaks, whereas it might be something else. It might be metering inaccuracies or illegal use, etc. So in the next step, in the second step, it's really important for us to break down those losses into apparent and real losses, and tackling low-hanging fruit, which comes afterwards. But before that, we need to quantify them for us to be able to address them effectively, knowing how big they are and where they're happening, which is locating or localizing those issues, whether that be leaks or maybe where our aging consumer meters are, so we can move to the next step, which is prioritization. Again, it's very important for us to gain more traction that would help us build from there and expand our interventions while we achieve more savings. Then, of course, taking action, which is kind of the most important piece of it. And finally, we need to evaluate our work and iterate, going again and seeing where we have gaps and where we can improve and so on. Again, it's a continuous cycle. We need to go through it one step by step, and we need to keep doing it as we move forward. Now, for us to be able to manage this whole life cycle management, let's see how technology can support us along the way. And here we need to do a disclaimer because people think that technology is a magical wand. It really is. It's really not, right? Technology is a tool that you can use to help you fix the problem, to detect the root causes. But then you need to do something else. You need to go to the field to try to fix the problem and to address. Again, I'm going back to the root causes because those are the important things that we need to address properly, right? And here we are seeing a paradigm shift from data-driven approach to insight-driven approach. We're here specifically talking about the fact that data is not enough. But before we dig deeper into that, let's have another poll. Please, Aya, if you can bring the poll. So this poll is asking how confident you are about the quality of your data. Do you think that it's a good quality, good frequency, and accurate and precise enough? Or do you think that maybe you need to improve a little bit more on how, where, and when you collect this data? We're here talking about flow volumes for bulk meters, consumer data, consumption data, and also pressure data among other types of data. So think about it as a big package, and we're really asking this question to understand where you are and see how and if we can help. Okay, I'm really not surprised by the results. If you can see the results on the screen, it looks like many people are not really confident. Thank you so much for being honest. And this is something that we see everywhere. Although everyone is collecting some sort of data here and there to a certain extent, but we always see some doubts about the accuracy and precision of this data. How we can potentially tackle this by validating the results, and improving again and trying to find the gaps and fix them so that we actually get a representative data that helps us in getting educated decisions. So it's not only about data collection. Even if your data is the best in terms of accuracy and precision, if you're just stacking data in your database and not actually using it to get actionable insights, then you're not unleashing the real value of this data. Step one is data collection. Then we move on to analysis, try to interpret this data and use it in your daily operations, to a plan for intervention that you can use to reduce non-revenue water, then do implement some activities or interventions to reduce losses, like, for example, leak actively control or pressure management, but all is done based on evidence. This is really important because we've gone a long way through data analysis and planning so that we can arrive at tangible outcomes at this step of implementation. And again, tracking and evaluation to make sure that we're doing the right thing at the right time and at the right place. Let's see how we can actually support water utilities in going through this whole cycle, right? Because we know that in many cases, getting through this whole process can be really intimidating, considering that this might be something new to you. I mean, technology to a certain extent, and it's always developing. So as soon as you bring in a new system, maybe a few years later, you would see that new stuff are coming up, and you maybe need some support in managing this technology transformation. And here we do that by going through what we call smooth tech adoption journey. And the journey starts from understanding your needs and based on data that is collected from the field through the right frequency and accuracy for timely insights. Then from there, if we need to see how this is applied in the field, we go there, we support you on understanding your network and the planning for the intervention. So for example, sizing for the meters, you really need to take care of that because if your meter is not capturing your minimum night flow, for example, that's not good for the accuracy and precision of your data. That's just one example. And this is why you need to place your sensors and meters strategically based on some analysis and assessment of the network. And it happens at this point in time, at this step. Then deploying some data loggers or using your existing data, like for example, from SCADA systems, and then moving on to the next step, which is analyzing this data, setting your targets and defining priorities, because at the end of the day, you have limited resources, limited time, and limited capacity. So you need to start with the low-hanging fruit, tackling them first, and then moving on to other interventions. Step 3 is continuously watching your data and the insights that come from the analysis, keeping your eye on the network, on those analyses, and trying to predict issues even before they emerge. Then utilizing those insights to allocate resources to the exact source of the problem. Again, it might not be a leak, it might be something else, it might be metering inaccuracies, or maybe even errors in handling and collecting the data. And evaluating and improving along the way to continuously optimize and improve the process and continue to maintain this reduction that you achieved in non-living water. Otherwise, it would go up again, as you probably know. Now, we're going to move on to the practical stuff, how we can apply this whole thing. And that's through our software, WaterCloud, implementing and involving a system correction factor from WLR&A from Kate and Allan work. And we'll see how to do it. And for that, I'm going to do a live demo and show you how the system works. And while I do that, please feel free to share any questions that you might have in the Q&A box, and we'll be happy to address them afterwards at the end of the meeting. So this is the dashboard. This is Flowless WaterCloud. And by the way, this is deployed for a project in Malaysia in partnership with Wyeth Water. You probably know Gary Wyeth and his team. We have worked with them on deploying these analyses, of course, integrating SCF to make them even more accurate and more precise, more fit for the context. And we'll see in a moment how we can get those results. So the first step in our loss management journey starts from here. This is the main dashboard. And in the main dashboard, you can see KPIs like, for example, total daily demand for yesterday and total daily leaks, the maximum recoverable leak, and some graphs to visualize those KPIs. You would see that here where the data is frozen at 30th of August, because this is what we call a snapshot analysis. A snapshot analysis, as the name suggests, is a one-time analysis for your data. Here we get your data through CSV files or Excel sheets or whatever. We plug them in the platform and magic happens. All the analyses are done automatically at like like a water audit, your annual or semi-annual report for the water audit, but it's not on paper. It's like this, very interactive, as you would see in a moment. This is one type of analysis that we make. We can also do it as a real-time analysis, of course, based on your historical data, but as your new data, your real-time data comes in, they get analyzed and visualized as soon as they arrive. Now, for us to be able to get an overview of everything that's happening in the network, we would go to this page or this tab, which shows us a map of the whole network. If you have 3 DMAs like what we have here in this project, or if you have 1,000 DMAs, you would be able to see this heat map, which really helps you to visualize through color coding your data and your problems. So for example, here we're looking at those 3 DMAs. And of course, for those 3 DMAs, we're collecting bulk flow at the inlets and outlets of the DMA. Each DMA has only one inlet to our advantage, but even if you have more inlets or more outlets, those can be monitored in near real time or real time to collect the data. And of course, one more very important data that you need to collect is the average zone pressure, which is collected at some point in the network, of course, based on the analysis that you probably already know for spotting or knowing where the average zone pressure point is. Now, we're here looking at real losses, and we can also toggle to other types of losses, so apparent losses and total losses. And as I move between those views, you would see that the colors are changing. That's because we need to view different angles of the problem and then help you in detecting the biggest problem and then how you can potentially fix it, right? So basically, let's maybe look at the total losses. And you would see that because this is a heat map, and to give more explanation of what a heat map is a color-coded map where you have each zone colored depending on how severe is the problem. So here in this DMA, we have a light color, which means that the problem is less severe than this one, for example. And if you hover over it, you would see the real losses, apparent losses, and total losses for this DMA. Now, in this pane, you would be able to choose between your DMAs. Like, for example, we've chosen this DMA called Taman Fulewa, and you would see different charts and different analyses. You can bob it up and look at it. You may also go and dig deeper into any of those 3 types of analyses for apparent losses, real losses, or the total losses. So the next step is really for us to break down the losses into its components, apparent losses and real losses. And the best way of doing it, of course, is the water balance, which you are probably familiar with. Here we're using the standard IWA water balance. And here we can, again, see the water balance for different zones or different DMAs. And then we can also change the time frame for the data, and everything would change accordingly. And we would see here that there are big problems, especially when it comes to real losses. Of course, for those who are not familiar with the water balance, quick clarification. For the water balance, we're looking at how much is getting into the DMA, which is the system input volume. And then this is broken down into authorized consumption and water losses, as Kate previously mentioned. And through this tool, you would be able to see that leakage is probably the major part of the problem, which would take us to the next step in our loss management journey, which is the leak inspector. And this is a tool for the utility or the operator to look at the whole network, but in the lens of leaks or real losses, right? Of course, in real losses, you also have overflows, but here we're really focusing more on leaks in this tool. Here you can, again, choose whatever DMA or zone you have. You can click on it here and you would see the data. For example, this is a very interesting chart because it shows different lines. The green one is the flow or the demand of the DMA. The red one is the leakage, and of course it's calculated through the minimum night flow analysis, and it's distributed along the whole day using FABAD, fixed area, variable area. And we can also get a better picture by clicking on more details. And of course, for all the constants and the assumptions that we have for each DMA are included here. So we have household usage, we have length of mains, we have N1, which you can specify for each DMA, numbers of house connection, and of course, the star for the day, which is the system correction factor for modifying the UARL. And you can, of course, play with the numbers from here, but I would not dare to do that because that would mess up things for now. Now, if we want to dig deeper into those, maybe we can also dig deeper into this chart and maybe toggle some lines off for us to see the result of the SCF. For that, I'm going to toggle off the minimum night flow, the demand, and also the upper zone pressure, the leak. And I would see here three lines. The one in blue is UARL, and the one in purple is UARL with SCF. And you would see how much we have decreased UARL when we introduced SCF. Kate, do you want maybe to jump in here and explain a little bit more how SCF worked for this project?
Yep, so this is for Taman Fuliwa, which had an SCF of 0.41. So this is all these three zones, really, really small zones. I mean, I think they were all under 800 service connections. They're all operating at pretty low pressures. Certainly, some of them were down to 15 meters, up to mid-20s in terms of average zone pressure. What you find in those circumstances is that because it's a small system, you're going to get fewer than the average number of UARL bursts on mains and services in any 1 year. And you're operating at very low pressure as well. And so the pressure bursts relationship comes into play here. So what this graph is really telling us is that that top level blue line, which is calculated using the 1999 UARL equation, that is really saying that that's the lowest we think we can go. But the SCF is telling us otherwise. And that is, in this situation, that's down to the fact that we're a very small system operating at a very low pressure. And in these circumstances, what we see with some of the customers around the world that we've worked with is that there is a certain combination of small system level of connections, operating at average operating pressure, and particularly in zones with flexible pipe materials. And you get to this spot where, and it shows it pretty well in this graph, that the corrected UARL volume is just slightly above the background leakage. Yeah, so we can definitely consider going into that zone and looking for bursts And we would certainly expect that we could set that target more towards the SCF corrected volume than the original volume calculated using the 1999 equation.
Thank you so much, Kate. That's very helpful. And one thing that I've forgotten to mention, which is the validation of data, as we mentioned earlier. And this can be easily done here because all of the assumptions can be modified. So, for example, if you noticed in the water balance, the illegal use was pretty high for some DMAs. That might be correct, really, but it might be, problem with the data. And if you noticed, for example, billing data was very low, which raises some doubts. And for that, this gives more insights for the utility to start in screening their data to getting more accurate and more precise insights. For example, if you need to maybe play with those constants, you can easily do that through the pane to right side pane in the leak inspector that we saw previously here, and you would be able to see the results of those changes on the analyses in as soon as you do those modifications, which is what we have done really with Kate and with Gary Wyeth and Sufyan Tzedek and their team. Now, the last step in our loss management journey is really trying to figure out what the utility can do to reduce those losses or leaks in this case. And for that, you can click on this button to go to the last step. In this tab, you would be able to see a comparison between the current status. So this is the current status for the network, and those are the potential savings that you can probably get through different interventions. We will see in a moment how we can also predict the impact of those different interventions. But before doing that, let's look at this very interesting chart. Of course, this is a quantification of the maximum recoverable leak, which is basically if we subtract the UARL, in this case, the UARL corrected with the system correction factor. If we subtract that from the total leaks in the network, we will be getting this figure. And of course, the potential monetary savings to give more incentive for different levels, different management levels in the organization to take action. One very interesting intervention that we can do here is pressure management. So, for example, if we go for this DMA, we would be able to see that this chart, it tells us how in this bar we have the total leak, and it's broken down into maximum recoverable leak and UARL. And this is the target that we have set for ourselves as a utility for leak reduction. We can see here that this can be a reasonable target because it falls within the maximum recoverable leak. If it's higher than the maximum recoverable leak, if it's higher than this figure, then it would be not achievable because it goes into the unavoidable annual real losses, right? Now, the last step is really for us to understand or to predict what we can do to reduce those leaks. Pressure management, even though small pressure management or small pressure reduction can yield some really good savings pretty much easily, relatively. So, for example, here we have pressure at almost 19 meters. If we drop that to 16 or maybe 15, you would see that we would be saving this amount of water for this very small system, which is something big, considering the small drop and considering that that pressure for this system is already small. If you have higher pressure, so for example, 50 or 60 or even 90, you would be probably realizing lots of savings. And it all depends on your figures for N1. Probably Kate can talk more about that if we have enough time. And the last step is saving this scenario and doing a comparison between different scenarios. As you can see here, we have different zones. with different scenarios that we created here using this tool, or maybe using other interventions, like, for example, the intervention of actively control, or the intervention of replacing consumer meters and its effect on losses reduction. We can compare all of that, and maybe if you have more DMAs, like hundreds of DMAs, we can visualize that in a map, in a heat map, to give you insights on where to start and how to tackle this problem. This is the end of our loss management journey. But we often see that utilities sometimes need even more support for them to understand the analysis, the interpretation of the data, and maybe to get faster interpretation and faster analysis. And this is really because the level of expertise is not the same across the whole organization. You have experts, you have maybe junior staff, and you have the people at the management level, so the financial manager and so on. We believe that all of those should be able to understand everything here, regardless of their expertise and regardless of their experience. To do that and to facilitate this, to make those insights accessible for everyone, we've developed a tool called Flowless Octopo. Think of it as your water network expert. It's an AI agent that safely and securely looks at your analysis, and you can ask it basically anything. So, for example, you can ask it to find leaks in Batao zone. Batao is really the name of the zone in this project in Malaysia. And Octopo would bring in the most relevant piece of insight, which is basically this chart. I can look at it, I can try to interpret it, and I can, of course, play with it, as you saw in other segments. It's bringing it really from other pages in the system, but it's bringing it at our fingertips instead of you trying to figure out where you saw that graph, or where trying to navigate for it. And then the most interesting part is it really explains it to us in plain English, or plain French, or plain Arabic, whatever you want, by describing what this chart says, what's the value of this chart, and then interpreting the data that is in the chart, and finally providing some insights for what you can do to fix the problem and tackle it. Like, for example, providing insights into the recent alerts, or maybe how to tackle this problem to reduce losses and so on. And then it continued to talk to you and engage in a conversation. So, for example, here it's asking me if I need to explore more details. If I say yes, it would bring in even more insights and more interpretation for the data and so on. Whatever you ask it, you don't have to be strictly compliant for certain prompts. You can ask it whatever you want really in the network, because it's using large language models to understand your prompt and answer based on it, and based on the expert analysis in the platform. I hope that has been helpful. Of course, in the platform, we have different tools, like, for example, Control Center for control management and automation of our assets, in addition to the events page, which is for alerts and incident management. Loss Manager, we've looked at it into pieces, and of course, we have also more modules for hydraulic analysis and for billing and so on and so forth. I'll stop sharing here, and I'll try to move really, really quickly through the remaining slides. I promise I will not take much more time, but here we would be digging deeper into more proof of what this technology and what those analysis like SCF can do for utilities, the value. And this is done through WLR&A, Kate and Lambert previous experience, which is really an extensive experience in Malta, Quebec, Australia, among other regions. But those are really where some regions or some countries where they implemented the SCF. And of course, we've worked before in Palestine, Malaysia, Brazil, Africa, and other regions. So one of the case studies, it's for a very small utility. We're talking about 10,000 house connections. The utility is called Selfit in Palestine, and they've been using Flowless system for a while, and they were able to detect leaks through minimum night flow analysis and step testing. We can go for artificial intelligence to detect leaks or to very simple interventions like step testing. And through this, Selfit was able to achieve or to save more than 10,000 cubic meters of water on a monthly basis. Those are some case studies from Alan and Kate's work. You can go through them at your own time afterwards when we share the recording and the slides. Now, finally, we need to if this sounds interesting and if this is something that can bring value to your organization and your community and your clients, then we would love to help you getting started. For you to really get started in leveraging smart technology in your network, first of all, this is like a wrap up for everything that we talked about, including the um, technology transformation journey. So understanding the context, then defining your targets, setting your priorities, deploying the technology based on that understanding of the context for the technology to be fit for the purpose, and then utilizing the insights, implementing those interventions based on the insights, and improving and iterating along the way. Those are some really interesting references that you can also refer to for some of the analyses. One of the very interesting resources is the leak suite. You can look at it, and it has lots of explanations about those concepts if you need to dig deeper into them. And you can also look at some more details to help you understand how you can apply those technology for your water system. If you're just starting with non-revenue water, then you can go to our knowledge base and read our white paper on reducing water losses and non-revenue water management. With that, I would stop talking and move on to the Q&A session. Please, Aya, if you can facilitate this. I see that we have 10 questions in the Q&A. Or alternatively, maybe if you need to say your question out loud, please feel free to raise your hand, and we'll bring you to the stage to unmute yourself and start asking your question if you prefer. Thank you.
Hi, Becca. Could I suggest that we start with questions that are aimed for Alan, because we've been talking a lot, and I'm sure a lot of the questions in the Q&A will be targeted for Alan's response.
Okay. We have 10 questions in the Q&A chat box. The first question is meant for both Kate and Alan. So let them address them to Alan. The first question from Elise. His question is, if long-term leakages from non-revenue water have been contributing to groundwater recharge in a specific region, should we still take measures to reduce the leakages, or should we consider this an advantage for aquifer and leave it as it is?
Oh, you'll need to unmute yourself, Alan.
There we are. Right. Yes, it's a very interesting question, actually, because you come across it in certain areas, and I've seen this happen in Mexico, where there is groundwater recharge only very occasionally from cyclones coming in from the Caribbean. And when we work with a client there, and we were moving them from intermittent supply on the district metered areas by setting them up with pressure management in those areas as well. We were moving very nicely towards continuous supply, and then found that the groundwater levels were dropping, it would be a problem, I suppose, for the individual utility to try to decide what is the right balance in that situation. So it does happen. But I would think it's something to be aware of. I always found it was very good when I was going to any new client in any country to have a look at geological maps first of all. You could learn an awful lot by looking at the drift maps and the solid geology. And yeah, you could tell those areas where there was only a small amount of ground storage, and the ones where there was maybe very deep surface storage, like in the case in Mexico. So yeah, I agree it happens, but I think you have to look at like every case, you have to understand the application of the principles to that particular utility and come up with a balance which is suitable for the circumstances.
Okay, thank you, Alan. The next question from Alexandro. Uh, for also, sorry, for Alan also. It says utilities can set the targets based on the value available data, taking into consideration a certain degree of confidence. But what about targets set by regulators? What do you think will be the best approach to ensure robust and sound strategy that both parties can rely on?
I'm going to be controversial, maybe not for the utility people, but generally, I'm going to say that the regulators don't understand many of the key principles, and I would say I would say that generally. We know all the things that pressure management can do, the management of excess pressures. And I ask you, how many places around the world do the regulators publish the pressures? Or do they ask the utilities to publish the pressures? They simply do not understand that this is the fundamental. It's like trying to manage space travel with pretending that gravity doesn't exist and doesn't influence it. It's as serious as that. And that there is a massive education gap that they look at the hard statistics like if you like the volume lost, or they like to use percentages or things like this. And we know because of our journey over the last 30 years that there were some fundamental things missing from our discussions with the regulators. And this is something that has got to be addressed. It's very difficult for utilities to criticize the regulators, but there we are. Sometimes somebody has to do it, and I think that possibly this is a good role where the IWA water loss specialist groups can actually bring some progress.
Okay, thank you, Alan. The third question is, in cities with intermittent services, aged infrastructure, low percentage of water meters, and day-by-day busy clerks, which would be the best actions to achieve lower index of non-revenue water in developing countries?
Maybe
It's from Hector.
is this one with best for Becca to jump in on, do you think?
No,
Alan, please feel free. Feel free to answer.
Okay. It depends which measure you're using. You said that the measure of non-revenue water, but because regulators and lots of other people still like to use percentages, and we know that percentages are almost useless. How many occasions over the past 30 years have we had major projects around the world with millions of dollars or euros or whatever, and they've set a target and they said we're at 40% and we're going to come down to 25%. And what happens? Gradually, there is some benefit at first, but then because it's working in percentage terms, and percentage doesn't tell you where to go, it doesn't tell you what to do, it doesn't tell you how much leakage you should be doing or whatever. And I don't know many cases where over 30 years where those kind of targets have been set and they've actually achieved anything near to what they were hoping to achieve. In fact, I know one country in the Middle East where they have exactly the same non-revenue water percentage now as they had when I was working there in 1997. And there's millions and millions of dollars have been spent there. So there's a huge education problem, really, uh, with the funding agencies, and I, d- I tried in my way to address this. Roland Limburger, a very great water engineer, and he used to say, we just have to let these people get on with using their percentages, and we'll get on with saving water. And I think that's what we're doing at the moment. The other thing is about percentages. The what they call a zero sum calculation. You can't reduce percentage real losses or percentage NRW, and you can't reduce consumption at the same time. It's absolutely impossible. It's like with a swing. If one goes up, the other must go down, because the consumption plus the NRW must equal 100%. So therefore, if you reduce one, then the other one goes up to make up the balance. And I hope that's some kind of answer that says, do what Bakker is saying. Do what the people in the IWA Water Loss Task Force are saying. Understand the fundamentals. Don't think you can get this down to just one number, and that we all have magic minds where we can say, oh yes, I'll just look at the one magic number and I'll say you should do this, 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 and this. You have to understand the fundamentals and then decide what to do and make sure your data is right.
Okay.
Okay.
We have a couple of questions now from Ellis. In a small DMA with low pressure, how do factors like service pipe length, zone pressure, the proportion of rigid mains and services influence leakage rates and non-revenue water? And should leakage management strategies differ based on these parameters? So,
yes, because what we found is with the original UARL, we had to make lots of broad assumptions. We had to make an assumption of linear pressure leakage relationship for the start. We knew it wasn't linear, but we didn't have anything better to go on in what was it now, nearly 30 years ago. We knew from a few studies around the world that pressure affected burst frequency, but not to the extent where anybody would have accepted that if we had put that forward. Even in the year 2000, when we did an international review for IWA, I think only 3 countries out of 1,000, 3 countries out of 30 in that survey thought that pressure had anything to do with leakage. Now just let that sink in. This is only 25 years ago, and that there were only 3 or 4 countries in the world, Japan, UK, Spain, were amongst the leaders in them, and they were the only ones who said that pressure management is fundamental to leakage management. And now just think how far we've come in the last 30 years in terms of getting people to understand that. So I think I've drifted off the question. I'm sorry, but I'll stop there because I don't want to hog the whole time.
yeah, we've got some questions for Bakker as well. Bakker, given the real-time flow and pressure data displayed in the dashboard, how does the software incorporate hydraulic modeling and statistical anomaly detection to differentiate between pressure-dependent leakages and background losses? Additionally, does it use machine learning for predictive analytics to forecast potential non-revenue water hotspots based on historic trends and seasonal variations?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Thank you so much, Alice, for asking it. Now, the thing is, hydraulic analysis can be really helpful for the non-revenue water calculations. But for the breakdown of losses or leaks into background leaks and unavoidable annual losses and so on, we can actually go without a hydraulic model. Of course, a hydraulic model would give us even more power and more insights, but for the breakdown of losses into fixed area and variable area, that's done through the FAVAD. You can probably go and dig deeper into more details for FAVAD in the leak suite in the references. And for the hydraulic model, it can really give more insights for detecting leaks, detecting the location of the leaks, right? So using pressure and flow measurements, we can be able to detect the location of the leaks or localize leaks in the DMA based on the analysis of discrepancy between real-time data or observed data and the ideal situation as simulated through the hydraulic model. I hope that that answers your question, Ellis, and I'm keeping it to short, just for us to spare more time for the remaining questions. I see some more questions at the bottom addressed for Allan. Aya, do you want maybe to ask those questions, the ones from Seiko, and then maybe we can go up to my questions and I can answer them quickly.
Yeah,
Becca,
sure.
can I just come back on
Oh, yeah, please.
the previous question, because I realized I didn't answer it. The question was, if you have a DMA, how much influence can all these things like the pipe materials and the pressure and so on have on it? And when Kate and I started doing the ULL with SCF modeling, we were expecting some things to occur, and then we suddenly found that things which we weren't expecting to occur were happening. And we realized that it's the conditions, that the percentage of pipe materials on the mains and the percentage of rigid materials on the mains and on the services and on the private part of them can be quite different. The lengths can be quite different. The pressure, the density of connections, all these things. And sometimes these effects work in conjunction with each other. And I either give you a much bigger figure or the much lower figure. And sometimes they cancel each other out. One thing will tend to push up the SCF, and something else will tend to bring it down. And one notable thing, Kate, isn't it? When we find a small system at low pressure, it does tend to be very much the pipe materials, whether they're rigid or flexible, that tends to make the difference, quite a big difference in the SCF. But the bursts come down anyway.
Yeah.
So I couldn't try to predict those things in my head. Some work with you, some work against you, but we customize it to the conditions in the individual zone. And that's where the strength of ULL with SCF is. And when you see some of the scatter plots that we have on the website, you can see how diverse the answers are. We spent about 10 years thinking there might be some constant line that we could work to. And then we realized after 10 years, no, we have to dig down deeper. So I hope that answers the question better from before. And take another question now, yeah? Okay.
Okay, there are a couple which are, I suppose, linked in a way from Seku, which is quite a broad set of questions. Within a water utility, who is the main person or couple of persons who implement non-revenue water strategy? And what is the best strategy to implement to reduce non-revenue water in a company? There may be questions which are a bit too broad to answer in depth.
I can say something on the first one. One of the utilities I worked with early on was Halifax Water in Canada. And they had the great benefit that they had a champion for non-revenue water at the board management level. They also had a very good technical champion in Ken Brothers, as if you like the operations manager, who was and under Ken Brothers, they had a very good, let's say, technician manager. So at all levels that were necessary to drive through a policy, they had somebody in a position of influence who could make sure that there was something consistent going forward. And if you're going to change behavior, I came to the conclusion that that's what you really need. You must have the support at the highest level. You must have the support at the intermediate level, and you must have the support further down when it moves on to the technical side, or get that technical support in from outside to help that person along the way. So that's the best way I can answer that question.
Thanks, Alan. We've only got a couple of minutes left because we're running to about
Okay.
3:30. I think there are some questions here for Baka. One from Alex.
Okay.
How is the real water loss subcomponents estimated through real losses per connection or real losses per kilometre of mains, etc.?
Yeah. Yeah.
Looks like
well,
this one's
Alan
for,
needs.
this one's
Yeah,
for
Alan,
Baka.
please.
No.
yeah.
Oh, well, no, I think the question is for you, Baka, for
Yeah.
within the WaterCloud solution. Is that correct, Alex?
Yeah. I'll answer briefly, and please, Alan, feel free to expand on
Yes.
that if you want. Thank you so much, Alex, for the question. So the water losses are really broken down into their components using different types of analyses. Of course, each component is calculated based on the available data. So just to give you an example, real losses are calculated based on the minimum night flow analysis in the platform, and they are then distributed along the whole day using FAVAD, right? For other types of losses, like for example, apparent losses, metering inaccuracies, they can be either calculated based on real-time data collected from the field, or if you don't have that type of data, then we can go with calculations using meters aging and so on, consumer meters aging.
Okay.
Okay.
Alan, do you want to expand, please?
If I just follow on quickly, this thing, should you use losses per connection per day or per kilometre? It's all a question, and in fact, the performance indicators group still only published those two figures, and the argument was going on 30 years ago, and it still goes on now, which is the better. People tend to publish both now. But one of the things I have found very recently, I've been very surprised to find that people are calculating litres per connection per day, and they're calculating ILI based upon the number of billed accounts or the number of administrative accounts. Now, you consider when you have blocks of apartments, very often the individuals are metered. Whereas, in fact, according to the IWA methodology we set out back in 1999, the number of connections is the number of physical connections to the water mains in the street. Okay, it is not the administrative number of connections. And when you bear in mind that in some highly urban cities, you can get 5 times the number of administrative connections and meters that you have of the technical connections to the mains, Kate and I are starting to find that quite a lot of calculations of liters per connection per day and ILI are being pushed too far down because using the number of administrative connections. So they might be coming out with an ILI of, let's say, or system correction factor of 0.4. But that's because they're using administrative connections, the number of metered accounts. And that if they were using something like the true number of the physical connections to the mains where it's leaking, then they'd be coming out with a figure of 0.8 or 1 or 1.2. So we found another reason now that we need to check the quality of the data right back to the source and make sure that everyone who's using these calculations now is using the actual number of physical connections to the mains, because otherwise the whole thing is completely screwed up. Dead silence.
Thanks, Alan.
Okay.
Thanks, Baka. There's another question, I think probably for Baka. How can you detect and locate a leak? For example, 2 litres per second in the network. Could you detect locate leakages running in parallel? This is from Enrique.
Okay. I was actually reading the first question. That is, but anyways, I'll answer the question that you read out, Kate. So, okay. Yes, for detecting leaks that are running in parallel and detecting them within the network, we are breaking down the whole network into several DMAs. And by doing that, we can detect leaks per DMA, even if those leaks are running in parallel. And to make it even easier for you to prioritize your work, as you saw in the analyses, we're then breaking down leaks into unavoidable annual real losses and UBL so that you can probably prioritize your work and calculate the economic level of leakage, and based on that, tackle those problems in the network. One very interesting intervention that can be done to detect leaks within the DMA, and it's really a very intuitive and easy to use intervention, is step testing, where you can go to the DMA and apply this intervention to detect leaks in different branches of the DMA. If you need of course, we can expand on that more if we have enough time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Aya.
Okay, thank you, Kate. So we run out of time, so we'll take 2 questions and we'll conclude this webinar. The second question is, how can we detect and locate a leak, for example, 2.5 in the network? Could you detect, allocate leakages running in parallel? This
I think
is
we've just
not
answered that.
interest for anyone.
I think we've just answered that one.
Okay.
The
one
other
above,
one
for Bakr,
about smart meters, I think is, yeah. So I guess
without using smart meters, how you estimate legitimate night? Yeah. Without using smart meters, how do you estimate legitimate night use, or LNF?
Yeah, sure. So for calculating the legitimate night use or legitimate night consumption, you may use different interventions, right? One, the easiest way is utilizing the studies that have been made in your region or in your country to estimate the legitimate night consumption based on the number of house connections or the users, and of course, through the assessed household consumption and other types of consumption for each DMA. That's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is actually taking samples at night. If you don't have smart meters. Of course, if you have smart consumer meters, then you can read those meters in real time, and this would make the process easier. But even if you don't have that, you can still get very reasonable results.
Okay, thank you, Bakr. Another question for you is, how was AZP calculated using pressure sensors, or how many per DMA or per kilometer was installed?
Yes, that's a very good question. Thank you so much, Danielle. So for the average zone pressure, it's really a point within the system. So you need to figure out where that point is, and then it would be really easy for you just to go there and install a pressure transducer or a pressure sensor. And by doing that, you can detect or you can collect data on average zone pressure. So it's only one pressure point. It's also if you have the possibility to collect more data on pressure within the DMA, this would be even better. Like collecting data on pressure from certain points, the critical points, the minimum or maximum, and so on. Allan, do you want to come in maybe to expand on any of those questions that we have already discussed?
Could I just jump in first, Allan, very, very quickly, because I know talking about average zone pressure is very important. with these calculations. Just to let whoever asked the question know, the Leak Suite library has got some guidance on the correct measurement of average zone pressure and establishing average zone point. And I think Alan will probably make the analogy of when you go to the doctor and you have your blood pressure taken, you have it taken on one arm close to the level of your heart. You don't have it taken around your neck or around your ankles or around your knees. So the positioning of the average zone point is very important to correctly measure average zone pressure. And Alan, I'll let you.
Yeah, and we developed that in the late 1990s because we wanted to give a systematized way of reasonably simple attempts to get something like a good representative point of average zone pressure. And then it's actually wonderful to see that you're using average zone pressure, because if you don't have an average zone pressure point to look at during your tests and your analysis, you cannot go anywhere. When I worked earlier in Italy, we explained all the methodologies. The groups of people went away, and then they came back with all the results. And I said, "What are your average zone pressures?" And they said, "Oh, we didn't think we needed those." So I said, "Sorry, we can't analyze your results. You can't even start it unless you have an average zone pressure. And you can do it in a complex way, or you can do it in a simple way. But most of the work that is done is just using good, simple, basic rules, which are in the free guidance on Leak Suite Library website.
Thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Kate. And we have one question. This is for Kate and Alan. How to identify or pinpoint leaks in low pressure pipelines less than 10 millimeters, which also has intermediate water supply.
Well, once you get onto the technology of let's say listening for leaks, then I think Bambas said at the start, there is no question that Alan couldn't answer. Well, he has found the question that I can't answer, because that is not my speciality. The people you need to talk to on that are Bambas and Stuart. They are the experts in leak detection at low pressures in plastic pipes.
Bambos, would you like to jump in?
Can I jump in, or?
Yes, of course.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it is extremely difficult, as Alan said. I'm not an expert either, and I think Stuart Hamilton, who is one of the best international experts in this field, he had to jump onto another call. So I'll give you my little bit of knowledge on this, and then maybe through Kate or Alan or Baki or Raya, you can get the details of Stuart if you want more in-depth knowledge. Plastic pipes do not transmit well at all well sound. All we're talking about, the traditional methods are sounding methods, is the transmission of sound through the media and through the pipe walls. So plastic pipes, the material tends to dampen the sound. Low pressure, it gets even worse. Intermittency, it's even worse. It's the worst thing you can have. So one way that, in my experience, that I've seen this, in Pakistan on a project that I was working, they applied gas. They inject gas into the pipe, and they have a sniffer, the gas, either with water, as the water is reintroduced back into the system. So a small quantity of gas, I don't know the exact ratios, but a small quantity of gas goes into it. And then where there are cracks, it comes out of the pipe, comes out of the solution in the water, comes out of the crack, and then filters through the ground and comes to the surface, and then is picked up. It's kind of, there is this special equipment like a ground microphone, but it can actually sense the gas, and you know whereabouts the leak is. You don't know exactly where it is because the gas comes out where there is the more porous part of the ground. If it's a solid surface like concrete, it would be difficult to surface. So in my experience, gas, it's appropriate in this kind of conditions and has been applied, and the results were satisfactory. So the details of how you apply it, etc., I'm not the one to give them because I don't have in-depth knowledge of the subject. Thank you.
Thanks, Bambos.
Thank you. And we have the last question in the chat. It's, I think, for Becker. It's from Kevin from Colombia. It says, what kind of integration does this platform allow with existing software and other platforms where the utility receives flow and pressure information from VRV and other pressure measurement points within the DMA?
Sure. Thank you so much, Kevin, for the question. So we always tell utilities that you don't really need to replace your existing data acquisition system, like, for example, SCADA systems or any other types of data loggers that you already have. What we do is we can do the integration on the software level through APIs. So if you have a data acquisition system that has APIs, we can easily do the integration, or we can also do the integration on the database level. The third type of integration is actually integrating those data loggers with the software directly. That's through protocols like MQTT, for example. I hope this answers the question.
Okay, we've overrun, which I'm very happy about and apologize for if you had somewhere else to go this afternoon or this evening. We've come to the end of the questions. We've come to the end of the presentation. Baka, Aya, myself, and Alan, really thank you for your time today. It's been a pleasure to show you our presentation and to open up the Q&A as well for some really interesting questions. We'll be sending out a follow-up email which will have the link to a survey. You can look at the survey now if you want to. The QR code is on the screen. And the survey is very, very quick. What you thought about this webinar and what you'd like to see in any future webinars. And as I say, the follow-up email will include links to the recordings and where you can go and download the PowerPoints from this webinar. So with that, I'll bring the session to a close, and I hope you all have a great day wherever you are in the world. Thank you very much.